You're watching the 2020-21 Jumps preview show on At The Races. Oh yes, in association with Betfair. Joining me to talk about the established chasers, a legend of the turf, Barry Geraghty, and a top analyst as well in the shape of Kevin Blake. So let's get straight to it. The Gold Cup, of course, is the blue ribbon of the chasing world, and what a Gold Cup we should have in 2021, because there's a whole load of horses who were bang in the mix last time. Of course, a horse going for a hat-trick of Gold Cups is Boum Photo. Is he the next best mate? Santini, who you could argue should have won the 2020 Gold Cup, is in the mix. Champ Geraghty, absolutely unbelievable on him in the RSA, or was Champ unbelievable? We'll ask Barry. Minello, Rindo's very promising. Top of the game. Lostintranslation was bang there in the Gold Cup. Could Samcro finally set up to the mark and show that he is the second coming? Oh, so much to chat about. I think we've got to go again to Barry straight away here, though. And I want to talk about the established horses. But, Barry, everyone will want your views on Champ, because if he can learn to jump, which is a big question, but if he can, or jump really well the whole way round the race, he's got some engine.
He has. He's a massive engine. And, you know, I thought he would win the RSA. I knew his jumping was a question mark. But I thought he's so much class. I thought an average round of jumping would be enough to get him through, and it did in the end. He has jumped well before. His first couple of runs, he was obviously first time. His second run, he jumped well in Newbury. So he still has the potential, I think, to get it right. He's a very good horse, and he's in the right hands too, because, you know, there's very few or anyone better than Nicky to produce one at Cheltenham. So I think he's a massive player, obviously, but it is a very, very competitive Gold Cup. The picture is massive.
Of course, one of the questions is, as far as I'm aware, is who will ride Champ? And I'm not going to ask you that question, Barry. It'd be very unfair. But just out of interest, taking you out of the mix, would Champ be a Tony McCoy ride or a Ruby Walsh ride?
It's hard to say, sure. Both men were more than capable of producing a horse like that. Wichita Lineman, AP obviously was brilliant on him, so it was that kind of ride. And obviously Ruby was more than capable of doing similar as well. So it's hard to say. It's
No, Barry, come on. You're just sitting on the fence. You know what I'm asking you here. You're sitting on the fence. Does the horse need to be slightly bullied to make him jump, or would he like a jockey who just sits there and let the horse do its own thing?
Well, I don't think he's a horse who'd benefit from bullying. I don't think many horses do, and especially a classier type. I think it's more working on confidence, getting a good rhythm going, and you build on that. Whereas if you're putting the gun to his head the whole way, you're affecting their confidence. So I think that only works to ride a horse aggressively like that. Only works with a fella who probably isn't as up for it as others are. But I think Champ is up for it, and as he proved that in Cheltenham and showed it. So it's more. I think it's more a case of working with him and giving him confidence, and, as I say, working on a good rhythm in your jumping. It's the same for most horses.
And Kevin, Barry proved on Moscow Flyer that sometimes jumping isn't absolutely key. I mean, we all use the cliche, you know, you've got to jump every fence brilliantly to win these big races, but it's not strictly true if you have that class, and it might just be that Champ has that class.
Well, to be honest, Matt, like, I watched Champ very closely last season. I really enjoyed analysing him. He's a very interesting character study. And for him, like, I thought I was quite pleased with his jumping in the RSA.
Really?
I thought he put it.
You're right.
Yeah.
Hold on. You're only saying that because Barry's in a big screen next to you, and you're worried he's just going to lean out and give you a left hook.
No, not at all. It's not, you know, for me, like, he jumps a little bit to his left. He's always done that, you know, but I thought he was quite good. I was worried about him in the RSA, you know, being perfectly honest. I didn't know if it was the right race to run him in. I thought he might improve a bit better at shorter trips, that his jumping might be a bit better suited to more pace in front of him. But I thought he was quite good. He was a little bit steadied into them down the back the last time round, but in the main, I thought he was solid enough. Look, it was a funny race, and look, I can't help but get the feeling that Minello will prove the best horse of these. If I'm brutally honest, I thought Minello, he got hooked up with Ahalo a long way out. I thought he saw him off. He was going to go win the race. He made a bad mistake at the last. For me, he was bone idle. Champ has obviously gone from looking well beaten to producing a wonderful finishing effort. But if you watch the last 50 yards of that race, as soon as Champ gets to Minello picks up like almost immediately again. Like, I think he had more in the tank. He was just being bone idle up the run in, and if Barry had ended up getting there a little bit sooner, it might have been interesting. But look,
wow. I've got to bring in Barry here. I know Minello Rindo is owned by a Barry, of course, Barry Maloney, the owner of Minello Rindo. But Barry, if you were asked to come back today and then you had the choice of Minello Rindo or Champ in a race with no retainers, none of that big cash involved, which one you would? There's no way in the world you'd be picking Minello Rindo, is there?
No, but there isn't a massive amount between them. So, but it was a good performance with Champ, obviously, to get up. Minello Rindo, he was beaten. I was 3 lengths down and the race was over. So he might have rallied, but there was only one horse going places at the line. And I take on board Kevin said Champ, he thought he jumped okay. He jumped okay for a novice race, but it's going to be harder against seasoned horses. You have to be slicker, quicker. Your jumping it's tested. It's a bigger test against seasoned horses, and he does need to be better than he was at Cheltenham. But I think that's very possible.
Neither of you fill me with confidence with those 2 ex-novices now, because I was hoping one of them was going to be exceptional. But if they're both just much of a muchness and they're both good horses, I mean, they're going to have to be better than that to beat the established stars, Kevin. And it was a bunch finish to the Gold Cup, but for so many different reasons, you could fancy lots of different horses from that finish.
Oh yeah, it was a mad Gold Cup, Matt. We lost at Native River in a couple of those, that we were hoping would put pace to the race. They ended up going steady, and you can watch that Gold Cup 10 times, watching a different horse every time, and you'll come away from it thinking that, maybe on a different day that it might have been different. Boum Photo had a fairly wide out spin, but probably got a better spin around than most. Santini would have really preferred a better gallop, surely, and had to switch a couple of times at the last 2 fences. Lostintranslation, I thought did everything right, but he might just have been going there a little bit fresh. He had that breeding operation after the King George. Colin Tizard's horses were disappointing all week at Cheltenham, and he jumped like a proper Gold Cup horse. He probably was doing too much with Robbie Power the whole way, came there to win the race and just got a little bit tired close home. I'd make a case for him coming back this season. I know Henry de Bromhead was frustrated. He got a few clatters across the head off Nico de Boinville's whip late on and didn't get the clearest of runs. Presenting Percy was creeping into the race, wasn't done with yet. There was an awful lot going on in that Gold Cup. So watching it all play out again this season and seeing which one comes out on top will be fascinating. But if you ask me to take one out of that brilliant Gold Cup finish, I'd still be a believer in Lostintranslation. I think he can be a big factor this season coming back.
Do you really believe in his stamina, Barry, Lostintranslation? I just wonder if he might be one of those horses that the Gold Cup trip will always just perhaps stretch him. He almost travels too well.
I would agree with you on last season's form, but I think the year is going to help him a lot, the extra year, and I would have him as a big player. As regards the Gold Cup itself last year, though, and Kevin has gone through each horse, and certain horses not getting an amazing run, and certain horses were and whatnot. But the cream came to the top. Boum Photo won. But the novice from the previous season, who's coming back, who I think is a big player, is Top of the Game. He's a massive big horse. Not ideal to have missed the year off, but he can only have improved physically for the time off because he is a giant, and he's in great novice form. I think he's a classy horse, and he's a big player as well.
Barry is riding at Gordon Elliott's, and he's not even mentioned the name of the horse who's now arrived at Gordon Elliott's, who's a Gold Cup horse. Now, this Presenting Percy, you said you've watched the Gold Cup video time and time again. He was just doing that creepy thing that Russell does at Cheltenham, which scares the living daylights out of people like Geraghty when they're there, because they know Russell's just behind them up the backside waiting to pounce. Presenting Percy still had a chance in that Gold Cup.
He was creeping, Matt. He was creeping, and he had not been asked for full effort at all. We know we can't keep referring back to it because it is a long time ago, but you think back to what he did in the RSA Chase a few years ago. Look, there's plenty of water under the bridge since then, but Pat Kelly, his team under a bit of a cloud perhaps for a while now, and the horses that have switched to Gordon are already coming out and winning. You know, it wouldn't be a shock if Gordon could bring Presenting Percy back, and you know, he's shown flashes in his career that he's as talented as anything around the place. He's won an RSA chase in wonderful style. I found myself saying it the last 2 years about him, not to forget about Presenting Percy, but I don't think it's time to forget about him just yet. I can't wait to see what Gordon does with him.
Let's just change tack slightly, because we can bring in some horses that might mix it, either Ryanair or the Gold Cup. And on the top of many people's lips, Kevin, will be Samcro. It's a tricky one, isn't it? Because we know the Gold Cup means everything to Gigginstown, but you could argue, I guess, on what we've seen so far as Samcro, that the Ryanair would be a better race for him.
Yeah, and then speaking to Gordon there a couple of weeks ago, he very much gave that impression. He said he'd be surprised if he didn't end up in a Ryanair. And sure, look, we know all about Samcro. Like, he was one of the most exciting horses in training there for a while. Ended up, you know, things went wrong with him. I know Gordon struggled with his health a little bit, but in fairness to him, we got him back last season, and it was some training performance to get him back to win the Marsh Novices Chase. And look, you know, he's beat two solid horses there in Mellon and Faugheen, but he'll need to take another step forward to get in amongst these open class chasers. And yeah, look, for the Ryanair, you have to put him in the mix, but in terms of venturing up to longer trips, I don't know if it's on his agenda. But yeah, we'll see. He'll appear in something like the John Durkin, you'd imagine, and we'll see how he lies in against these proven horses.
Barry, a few firms do quote Lost in Translation for the Ryanair. Mostly, though, of course, they quote him for the Gold Cup. But I guess, you know, if you're looking at an anti-post bet, I mean, Min at around 10 to 1, the old boy's going to be very hard to keep out the first three come the day.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with you completely. And you'd imagine that is the race he's going to go, where so many other horses have options at the Gold Cup. You mentioned Lost in Translation, who you'd be surprised if he went for the Ryanair over the Gold Cup. I would be with Kevin as regards Samcro, and he was a good performance last year, but he'd have to take another step up. I think Min is fairly solid, and he'd be the one to beat, and you know that's going to be his target.
There will be one or two people watching this Established Chasers preview and saying, oh my goodness, they've talked about the Gold Cup, they've talked about the Ryanair, and they've still yet to mention the greatest chaser on planet Earth. I think it's time to bring in Faugheen, Kevin. What would you do with Faugheen at the age of 13?
Oh, the same thing as I did with him at the age of 12, I'd imagine. You know, he's shown last season that he's still a top-class performer. He'll have to do a little bit, you know, he'll have tougher tasks on his plate in open company this time around. But look, if everyone involved with him is happy that he's enjoying himself and showing plenty of spark, I'll throw him into the mix there and see where he gets on and see how he gets on. You know, it's great to see him keeping rolling at the sort of age he is. You know, he's missed plenty of time over the years, so it's great to see him out and enjoying himself and being competitive at the highest level still.
And we've not mentioned Frodon, who, of course, returned not long ago at Cheltenham with a tremendous win under Bryony Frost, just jumping for fun. He could mix it in the Ryanair and Gold Cup as well. Faster chasers, Kevin. A lot of people, for instance, Richard Williams on Twitter saying, fuck-a-doodoree. Got to be slightly careful how you say that, but luckily it is on the At The Races YouTube channel. Fuck-a-doodoree, what do you make of him? What's the trip for him?
Yeah, looking forward to it this year, Matt. I think all involved think that there's a bit of unfinished business with Fakir Duderee. Won a Grade 1 last year, obviously, but you know, things just didn't go perfectly for him in his two starts after that. He's one of those that he jumps so well, he's so quick and aggressive at his fences that all involved were happy to give him his chance at 2 miles. He'll be going up in trip, I'd imagine, this season, certainly to mid-range, maybe even further, and it'll be great to see what he can do. You know, we'll always be helped by soft ground. Could potentially start in a Clonmel Oil chase in a few weeks, but yeah, I'd still be hopeful that we haven't seen the very best of him, and you know, with a view to something like the Ryanair, that could be a possibility long term.
And Barry, again, a lot of people on social media asking what you would do with Defi Du Seuil. Obviously, he was shocking, to be quite frank, in the champion chase. You know that, we know that, but we know he's much better than that. Presumably, would you step him up in trip or just stick at that champion chase trip?
His performance in the Tingle Creek and the Clarence House, he was brilliant both days. And it's a bit like Paisley Park. You can't write a horse off on one disappointing run. He's been to Cheltenham and proven himself there twice before. He does get further, but he doesn't need further. So for me, I'd be more than happy to keep him at a champion chase. He'd have no problem stepping up to Ryanair, but no, I'd imagine the champion chase would be his primary target anyway, and I wouldn't see any reason why that would change.
Is it? And Barry, sorry, Matt. Barry, on the day in the champion chase, looking back on it now, like what did you feel was the issue? Was he just flat? Was it just an off day, or was there something more to it?
No, that's how it felt. You know, I lined him up for a bit of room. All I was looking for was a clear round because the race I'd cut up. So I've got a bit of room, get him settled, get him jumping. But I knew jumping the fence, turned away from the stands, he just landed at the back of that, and he was lifeless. So I had to nurse him along and nurse him to try and see if I could get a finish out of him, but it wasn't there. So for whatever reason, and no one could ever really put their finger on it, he just didn't turn up on the day. But he's been very consistent over the years, and I say he's been to the festival twice and won before. So, you know, it's the only disappointing run he's had, I think, apart from the exception when Philip's horse missed the season. But he's been rock solid apart from that.
Is it fair to say as a chaser, Barry, that he was never going to be one that would mate lengths at fences? I always felt with Defi that he sort of got over the obstacles, but he was not what I would call he wasn't a sprinter sacre, a flamboyant chaser.
He doesn't have the size, but I promise you want to see the jump he threw at the last in the JLT the previous season. No, he's of the chasers that I won't be riding this season, he is the one I would miss the most by a million miles. He is some fun to ride.
Oh, that's a big statement to make. And looking at that champion chase, I mean, the champion chase is a fascinating anti-post race because there'll be many people saying to themselves, Altior, 14-1, hello. I mean, as an anti-post bet, Shakun Pursua, of course, is very much the up-and-coming pretender to the crown. Defi Du Seul's got to bounce back, as we've talked about. Fakadoudery might go up in trip. And then you're into a realm of horses that you wouldn't really think were necessarily good enough to win if the others were at a peak. How would you sum up Altior, Kevin? Because there'll be some people looking at that at 14-1 and they'll say that's just crazy.
Well, sure, look, it's tricky with Altior. Look, he's one of the best horses of recent years, but he is getting older. He has had plenty of issues, physical issues over the years. I've been saying it the last couple of seasons, you know, you just wouldn't like to assume that he's going to be the same horse when he comes back after his break. So, look, you hope that he'll be the same sort of horse and can still be competitive in that division. But I wouldn't like to take it for granted. We'll wait and see with him. And look, for me, this division, Shakun Pursua is the one with the X factor. You know, he arguably put up the best performance in a 2-mile chase last season at the Dublin Racing Festival, where he really engaged with Min from a long way out and saw him off late on. You know, and Min did what he did at Cheltenham. It just, it was one of those. The race was set up for Shakun Pursua to produce a really big effort, it seemed. But, you know, he only won 3 or 4 lengths at the end. But maybe looking back on it now and watching it back there, preparing for this, I was perhaps a little bit harsh on him at the time, you know, and I think it was a pity he missed out on Cheltenham late on. But coming back this season, he'll still have a bit of an unknown to overcome in that he's never been to Cheltenham, but he looks the one to beat in the division to me.
He's an extraordinarily lightly raced horse, Shakun Pursua, of course. Only had 8 races. He's won 4 of them. Smashed up Defi Du Seuil in the Ryanair Novices Chase at Punchestown, beating that horse by over 4 lengths. And at the age of 9, with just those 8 races. Barry, you want to come in?
Yeah, just as regards Altior, and the vibes have been really good from 7 barrels on him. I know he's pushing on in years. He won the champion chase the previous year in a very slowly run race, and I don't think that was playing to his strengths. I think the faster the pace, the better it will suit. And Shakun Pursua, his style of racing is going to, for me, will play to Altior's strengths. And then you've Defi Du Seuil in the middle. So I think it's a more competitive race than the market suggests. And, you know, it was testing me what way this champion chase was going to work out last season between the 3 horses, the pace, Altior, you know, being the dark one coming from off the pace. It makes it very tricky for a rider in the middle. So I think it's more competitive and a stronger race than people might think.
Yeah, in the end, it was no pace that was the problem for you all the way round. But anyway, it will change this time around. Look, let's have a look at the established chasers selections from the expert panel, and I've included myself in this, to see exactly who we think could take centre stage in 2020-21. And Barry, you've bunged in Defi Du Seuil. You're keeping the faith. Oh,
definitely. No, he's one of the most exciting horses I've ridden over a fence. He's deadly, so he is. Loves the game, and he's all class.
Okay, and Kevin, Minello, Rindo, you're, in this fantasy world that this horse is as good as Champ.
Yeah, we briefly mentioned it earlier, Matt, but look, I love this horse as a novice hurdler. Was really excited about him last season. I wasn't that excited about his chasing debut. You know, he was quite careful. He was minding himself. He was better on a second start over fences. I thought there was real progression there to what we saw in the RSA chase. He jumped really well that day, and I think he got himself beat. You know, he made that mistake at the last. He was bow and idle up the run in. You know, I'm excited to see what he can do in open company, which, you know, I think better races will suit him better. More pace in front of him. Will get carried into the races for longer. And look, you make him up short. I know you believe Champ is better, but I'm happy to have Manila Endo in my corner.
Well, good luck with those two selections. I'm going to put in Santini in the Gold Cup. I have a feeling Nico de Boinville will feel Santini should have won the Gold Cup this year. I was totally against him going into the race. I'll hold my hands up. I'm mature enough to hold my hands up and say I got it wrong with Santini. I got it wrong with Epatante as well. It takes a man who can admit that, and I am all man. So I'll hold my hands up. Santini should have won the Gold Cup, and I think he will make amends in 2021. Lightly raced Santini over fences, and I think Nico will be winning yet another Gold Cup. You're watching the Jumps preview show on the At The Races YouTube channel, very kindly sponsored by Betfair. Remember, elsewhere on the At The Races YouTube channel, you will find sections on the established hurdlers, on the novice hurdlers, and the novice chasers. Don't miss it.